back to the channel, everybody. As you can tell by the intro, we got the diff all welded up and plated. Now we just gotta take care of a few things to get it back into the car. The few things that we're gonna take care of before we put the diff back in the car, I got some new diff seals and I got some new poly bushings for the mounting point on the diff. Also, something I had to take care of during the week from the last video, I had to pull out the passenger side knuckle and axle all together as one. I was unable to get the axle nut off here in my garage. I brought it to work and got an air impact on it, and I got that axle nut off. I did, however, have to put some heat on the axle, which then cooked all the grease out of the wheel bearing. That being said, I did get a new wheel bearing and a spindle put into the knuckle, so that is all fresh and ready to go. So I'll give you guys a quick look at that. This is the new spindle, 26 spline. We flip it around. The new wheel bearing is pressed inside. I am also replacing this outer axle seal as well. I got those brand new. I got fresh ones for the diff and for the back of the knuckle. So we'll take care of that real quick, and then we can hopefully work on the bushings for the mounting point of the diff and get this thing back in the car. I'll give you guys a quick look at what the diff looks like. So for the aluminum plating, I used 1/4 inch diamond plate for the front and the back. So this is the front side that faces towards the front of the car, and I will spin it around and show you guys the other side as well. This is the back side of the diff. That piece goes all the way across. I did end up cutting 2 pieces, not just one solid piece, just so I could have some more wiggle room when I'm setting that on the arms. And it turned out pretty decent. I'll be the first one to say the aluminum welds on this are not 100%. It is aluminum MIG, not TIG. And I am not a professional at welding aluminum. So there is a little bit of pinholes through some of the welds, not all the way, just in a couple of little spots. Aluminum is very fussy with welding. You have to have that spotless and very clean to weld. This is a 29-year-old diff. There's all kinds of contaminants on this material, in the material. I did the best for cleaning, and it is what it is. It's on there, and it's gonna hold a lot more power than it did before. So now I'll get you guys set up on the tripod, and we'll pull out the diff seals, get the new ones put in, and get the new ones put on the back side of the knuckles as well. All right, I got you guys set up here. I can't remember exactly how I did this the last time. I'm pretty sure I did these diff seals like 2 years ago when I did have this apart and welded the inside of the diff. You just have to be careful not to scratch up the actual seal surface on the diff itself, otherwise it won't seal correctly and you'll have some leaking problems. Now I'm gonna try and just go in here with a pry bar and see if I can get enough leverage to pop this thing out. Should come out fairly easy. If you're struggling with that, there might be an issue. Now this one looks a little bit different than the new one that I got, but it is the same diameter and same depth, so that shouldn't be an issue. So we'll get this new one pressed in here. It's pretty easy to do, and this actually has a steel collar, so maybe they kind of upgraded the seal a little bit because there's like a steel ring on here to where you can tap that in a little easier. This one is all like rubber, so you can easily tear that. We're just gonna get a little bit of grease on the inside portion of this and get it pressed into the diff. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe this seal surface out with a paper towel just to make sure it is nice and clean and free of debris. There's a little bit of stuff from the previous seal stuck in here. You wanna make sure this mounting surface is as clean as possible so it doesn't scar up the new seal and it seals properly. We'll go ahead and put a little bit of bearing grease on the inside of this seal and then tap it in with my rubber mallet. When doing any seal, they're pretty easy to put in. You just have to be careful not to put them in too far. These having like a bump stop so you can't go too far is really nice. So we're gonna go ahead and put the other side in, and then we'll move on to putting the diff bushings in. But first we'll have to get those old ones out, and they're in there pretty tight. All right, now that we got the diff seals in, that's ready to go besides the bushings. We're gonna do that in just a little bit. Next, we're gonna put the new axle seals on the back side of each of the knuckles. I did the axle seal on the driver's side last year, but we're just gonna do both of them because they're pretty cheap to do and very easy. So we're gonna get those pressed in here real quick. Doesn't take very much, and then we don't have to worry about that leaking, and it seals real nice on the back side of the bearing. I believe we can do basically the same thing we just did with the diff bushings. Just take your pry bar and kind of shove it right in there. This is a little bit tippy and not as much leverage to like get this out. So we'll just kind of position it in a way that we can hold this. And there we go. That's the passenger side. That one has not been replaced, probably in the full 29 years that this car has been together. That was kind of stuck in there. It's peeling apart, so I will have to clean off the mounting surface on this before we put the new one in. So we're gonna pull out the driver's side as well, and then we'll do both of them together. There we go. Now we got the first one lubricated and ready to go back in. We'll give it a couple of taps. I'll grab like a little piece of flat steel and just kind of tap around the outer ring. This one doesn't have as big of a lip as the Diff Seal does, so I don't want to sit there and smack the rubber on this. So like I said, I'll just grab a piece of flat and give it some taps around the outside and work that in. All right, we got this one done. The seal is in there. We got it all greased up. The splines have grease in them as well. We'll set this off to the side and get the other one put in. All right, so the diff bushings that I went with are energy suspension bushings. Ordering those from like your local parts store would have taken almost 29 days for them to just receive it in store. Drift HQ had these in 3 days. That's pretty good. Not sponsored, but if you're looking for any type of drift stuff, Drift HQ is the way to go. Now, taking a look at these diff bushings, they are basically like pressed into this collar on the wishbone section of the diff. I had the diff flipped upside down and clamped to the bench at work, kind of like so. And I had a steel collar and my 4-pound hammer slamming on this bushing, and I couldn't get it to move. Now, these have been in here for 29 years. With aluminum, if you're not aware of how aluminum kind of works, it's similar to steel. It doesn't rust, but it corrodes. Corrosion on aluminum is basically the same thing as rust on steel. It can be just as difficult to get things out of corroded aluminum as rusted steel. So slamming on that with a 4-pound hammer with like a full swing wouldn't move that piece of steel ring on the bushing out of the aluminum. So I may have to look at like cutting these bushings out before putting the new ones in. Not looking forward to it, but it might be the only option I have to get these out without having to bring it somewhere to have it pressed or purchase a press myself and press it out. That being said, I'm going to tackle getting this side out and then this side out. See if we can get these slammed out. I might start by just taking a drill bit and drilling out the center rubber portion so we can get enough room to get a saw in here and make like a cut and see if we can pound it out after that. All right, if we take a look at the outer mounting piece of your diff bushing, this is what mounts with two 12mm bolts to your chassis, and then the main bolt is in the middle. It will be replaced with this outer piece. So I have to somehow get this inner rubber piece out of here because we need the metal piece, and then it gets mounted to this new bushing on the outside. I have no idea how I'm gonna do that, but we're gonna figure it out. If we look at the main bushing that goes into the actual arm of the diff, this is a very large piece of like poly rubber bushing. This is very large compared to what's in there, or it seems like it's pretty large. Should be interesting getting that one out and then pressing this new one in. I bought a small C-clamp piece that should be able to help kind of clamp this back in, but getting the old one out is going to be the challenge. All right, so clamping it to my workbench did not work. I ended up just clamping it to my jack down here, so there's at least like a hard mounting surface, and then took my chisel with a hammer and basically like cut off the old rubber, which is right here. We don't need that anymore. Now I just gotta flip it and do the same thing to the bottom, and then just the steel mounting piece is left. Then just the steel mounting plate is left to be able to use with the new poly bushing. All right, so now that these mounting plates are drying with some paint on them, we're now gonna move to the diff bushings. These guys. I sprayed some penetrating oil around the steel portion of this to let it soak basically all morning. So hopefully these should come out kind of easy. I mean, I say that now, but I was slamming on it with a big sledgehammer and I couldn't get them to move at work on the table. We're gonna try a couple of things to try and loosen it up real quick. I'm going to drill a couple of holes. Maybe I can get them drilled into that steel ring to kind of weaken that a little bit so they can maybe crush in on it themselves, and hopefully they'll be able to press that out or slam it out or whatever it may be. So we'll give that a try and see what we can make happen with these bushings. Who said you needed a press to get those bushings out? I got them out with a little sawzall action, a chisel and a hammer. Heck yeah, man. Now we're gonna go ahead, clean out all the corrosion and stuff from the aluminum, get them nice and cleaned up, lubricate them a little bit with the poly bushing lube that comes with it, and get these new bushings pressed in. All right, so this bushing kit comes with 2 of these little containers of like the bushing grease. Use it, all of it if you want to. They give you plenty to be able to lubricate these poly bushings so they press in nice and easy. Use as much as you feel needed. If you just use a tiny little bit, it probably isn't gonna go in very well. You're probably gonna struggle. Use the lubricant. There's also these little collars that go inside of the main bushing here. You're gonna need lubrication on this and on the inside of that as well to press that into your bushing. All right, I got this plate. I'm gonna just put that on the bottom and use that to be able to clamp the bushing down on the top with this piece. I might need another little piece as well for the top because that little collar is pretty small. Let's grab another one of them. Gonna set that up on the top. Hopefully this goes in pretty easy. It actually started going by hand, so that's good. Just to make it easier on myself, I'll put the clamp on it. So getting the diff back into the car, you just do it in reverse order from taking it out. It is easier said than done. Coming down with the diff is a lot easier than going back up. It is tippy on a jack, so you almost need like 3 or 4 hands. You only got 2, so just be careful. Take your time going back up into the subframe of the car. Looking at it from under here again, we gotta get up on those bolts right up in there, and then back over in here as well. And we have to get it back up onto the PPF and get it all bolted back in the car. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Taking it out sometimes takes longer than putting it back in, but we'll see how fast we can get this back into the car, get it all wrapped up for today. All right, so that took me 15-20 minutes, but I got the diff back up into the car. I got the 2 17mm nuts and the 4 12mm nuts all back in there, securing the poly bushing section of the diff back in place, along with the 2 longer bolts that go through the PPF right in there. Now the diff is up there. Before, when I would release the jack off of like lifting it up from the diff, it would sag, it would move, there was a lot of twist. Now, the diff doesn't move at all. There is zero movement. That is gonna greatly improve the amount of power and torque put to the rear wheels. However, it may create another weak point of the CV axles, but I would much rather have the CV axles be the weak point than the diff. Now the next step for what we're gonna do here, I have to put the other 17mm bolts that are like these ones back up in the front that hold it to the transmission, and that'll complete the PPF section. Then I need to reattach the drive shaft to the front of the diff, and then move to putting the CV axles back into the car. Then we gotta put both rear knuckles back in. I do, however, need to make a run back into town to the parts store for another axle nut. The axle nut that came with the new passenger side spindle is not the right thread, which is odd, but it's a completely different nut than what is supposed to be on here. It's a 32mm, it should be 29, and the diameter of the thread hole is way too big compared to the axle. So I need to go and get a new one of those so that I can reattach the knuckle and everything to the CV axle. Then we'll move on to the brakes and so on until everything is back in the car. We're gonna start off by putting the knuckle into the upper control arm first. Makes it a lot easier to get that pop down in place. So I'll go ahead, get this knuckle on here and show you when it's done. There you have it. We got this side all back together. Now that this knuckle is all put back in, we do have to put the tube back in that we cut out that kind of supports the subframe in there. I'll have to clean that all up, weld that back in, and then run the bolts in up front. So that's all set, ready to go. And then we'll jump over to the other side and rebolt in the knuckle and bolt the axle in on that side as well. And then it's basically wrapped up. I do need to run into town and get one more axle nut. The one that came with it is the wrong size, and I don't have any gear oil for the rear diff. So we'll need to get that so we can refill the diff, and it's all good to go. So we got the driver's side all back together and the drive shaft bolted back in. This side is all bolted back up, knuckles in. The brake caliper, however, is not. I went to bleed the brakes and the piston itself, the seal right around here, was blasting fluid out again. So that's gonna get replaced on warranty, I think for the 4th or 5th time, which is quite ridiculous, but remanufactured parts are a 50-50 chance every time. So far I've had kind of poor luck with that. Hopefully this next caliper gives me a little bit more of a positive good luck vibe. But the drive shaft is bolted in, ready to go. Next step, we will be refilling the diff with some diff fluid. After that, I have to rehang the second section or the rear portion of the exhaust, and then that is gonna wrap it up for today. That is actually pretty decent timing. Didn't take super long to get a lot of this done, which is good. We're gonna get some diff fluid back in this thing. I do need to tighten the bolts or the drain plugs. Once the drain plug is secure, then we will go ahead and fill the diff. Basically, a rule of thumb for filling your diff, you only need to go as full as your fill hole or the fill bung. Once you got it to where the fluid is coming back out of your fill hole, that's all you need. It doesn't take as much as you might think. Maybe a quart or so, maybe a little less. For a Miata, every vehicle is different. So you can get like a pumping system to be able to pump this in. I just use like a rubber hose and then kind of tip this up into the air. Give it a little bit of a squeeze. Just make sure you hold the hose on the bottle so it doesn't come blasting out on you. We got the diff all filled up. Now we're just gonna spray off a little bit of the diff fluid that kind of drip down so it doesn't just sit there and cake on. Just like that. let that drip off into the pan, and then we'll wipe it all off with the rag. We got this all back together. Everything is buttoned up, exhaust and all. The rear portion is back in the car, diffs filled up, axles are in, knuckles are back on, PPF is all bolted in. We're all set. Everything is back in the car, besides the driver's side caliper. We'll get to that in a little while. But everything from the diff project is all back in. The bushings are in and set. And man, oh man, it feels nice and solid back here. I used to be able to like jack up on the diff and you could see the diff flex and move because the old bushings were just completely shot, all wore out, but they were 29-year-old bushings. Now these are fresh. I'm ready, I'm excited. This should rip. Now there's gonna be a lot more power getting to the rear wheels. Super excited for that. It's gonna be great to see what this thing can do now that there is a solid rear end. It is also braced, so now I can turn the boost up a little bit. That's gonna be pretty exciting as well. That being said, we're all wrapped up. Everything is all buttoned up for the day. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.